the session was inspired by a question on what a lot of youth workers in Ireland are dealing with, trying to deal with the Andrew Tate phenomenon and what it's bringing up for young people and what it's bringing up for youth workers and youth services. And so then when we thought, okay, how can we address this? We of course went to the amazing collaborators we have in our network. Danny, who works with the Rialto Youth Project in Dublin, she has been working on issues of education and empowerment with young people for a number of years. She was part of a project called Transforming Hate, which was a really inspiring project, which is all about, it's a compassion-led response to working with young people. And it's using connecting methodologies and practices. And then we were very fortunate, our partners Concern Worldwide, we're doing some really interesting work with the Sonke Gender Justice Project in South Africa, and also within a regional capacity in the southern part of Africa. And so they linked us in to Ontla and Thembe, who are both here today. So we are delighted to have everybody to come in and create this discussion today. And, you know, that's something that we really hope is that it is something that you all find a connection in your own work and draw out the themes and then reflect it back in the questions and answers piece. So we're going to start with just inviting, Danny, would you mind starting actually? You might just give us a short enough introduction to what led you to the work you're currently doing, and then Thembe, who's in South Africa, and Ontla, who's in Botswana, you might also do the same, and then we'll take it from there. Okay?
Yeah, thanks so much, Sally. Great to be here to see you all today. So I'm Danny. I work in Rialto Youth Project, and I suppose we do a lot of different processes and programs in Rialto, but one of the key pieces that we always try to do is around that socially engaged arts practice, and it is about looking at some of the wider themes that are happening and issues within society, and looking at how do they impact on young people and how do we respond to them. And so we always kind of do that through working in collaboration with other artists. And the project that we're currently doing at the moment is in collaboration with Fiona Whelan, who is an artist, and also Broken Talkers, who are a theatre company. And how it came about is that we actually began to do a project in 2012, and it was looking at what was it like to grow up and live and work in Rialto as a young woman. So we work with young people. We have after schools as well. So we're very lucky that we get to work with young people from 5 to 25. And we began to do programs with them around understanding what their life was like to grow up. And after a process of a couple of years, we ended up collecting over 250 stories from young girls and women. And when we collected these stories, they were so rich and so powerful, we knew we had to do something with them. So we worked with Kathleen Lynch, who is the equality professor in UCD, and she came and she helped us do a thematic analysis of those stories. And in those stories, we ended up finding out that there were 7 main themes that emerged. And some of them were in relation to class and how young women were growing up within what they call the bubble of the class system. Some were in relation to the role of carers as women, and whether that was caring for children or caring for family or siblings. Some of it was in relation to grief, and the grief that people who are more oppressed and are in areas of inequality, the grief that they have in their lives is much bigger. But one of the big themes was around violence and male violence that they experienced in their lives. And this male violence wasn't only from people that, you know, they may encounter if they're walking down the street at night. It was also men that were in their lives. So, but it then also contradicted itself to look at the love and the care that they had for the men in their lives. So whether it was that they feared for their brothers or their sons in relation to being involved in things like gang violence or drug dealing or drug addiction, they still had this love and nurture. But then there was also all the time, at any moment, the fear and the threat of violence in their lives. So we decided that we would make a response to that. And so we tried to think about it. We spent a couple of years trying to develop our methodologies and practice around how would we do work like this. So what needs to be different to work with young men to support them in how they are living in their lives. So through that, then we began to develop a program from 2018, and it's still in existence today, called What Does He Need? And the idea is to take a needs-based approach and a compassionate-based approach, working with young men to try and support them to navigate their lives and to navigate what is it like to be influenced by the world you live in, and in turn then influence that world. And in doing that, then what you needed to look at was what does masculinity look like? And the full kind of idea of masculinity is a very beautiful thing, and it brings lots of strengths. But then what we also noticed is that there were also some problematic areas of masculinity that were influencing the violence that people were receiving. So we began to look at themes that included power. And the need for power can be an okay need, but the issue comes when the power, you're trying to have power over somebody. And then the other idea is around dominance. So when you mix power and dominance together, then what does that look like? And it can look very, very different then in terms of masculinity. And then, so the other thing then was the suppression of vulnerability. So unfortunately, a lot of boys and young men that we are working with, they're growing up in a world that is telling them not to be vulnerable, that is telling them that they need to hold this strength and these kind of characteristics, that certain emotions are okay, such as anger, but other emotions such as sadness aren't. So how do we support young men to fulfill all of those emotional needs and emotional regulation that they have? And then the final theme that we looked at is around suppression of anything feminine. And that idea that if you are any other gender that is not male, then you are seen as lesser. And we see that a lot through young men and how they might slag each other, and they might, use, the horrible words that we know, but they refer to that idea of women because it's the idea that it's lesser. So that's the approach that we've taken with those 4 themes. And then we've used arts-based creative methods in order to support young men to find their voice, to be able to really speak about what their truth is and find ways that they can navigate through their adolescence and through growing up and figure out, what is happening for them and how are they then able to shape who they grow up to be. So yeah, so we have a website and there's all the different types of methodologies that we use. If anyone wants to have a little look at it, it's whatdoesheneed.com, and it has everything from the Boys in the Making program to audio pieces to posters that boys and young men have made. And it is always about them having a space to find their voice and using dialogue as the way to approach it, rather than a punitive approach that, if a young man says something in a space with you, you're not shutting it down. You're not saying things like, oh, you can't say things like that in here. You're opening it up and you're creating spaces for them to really explore these issues. Because it's really hard. Like it's everything from, the vulnerability to pornography to, how they see themselves in the world to how the world sees them. And especially for young working class young men is the area that we work in. When they feel like they're already being quite excluded in society, it can be quite difficult for them to then find a space. And then that's often what they talk about then when they end up in a gang, is that the gang meets their needs. The gang gives them respect and they value them. They, they keep them safe. They have a sense of belonging, community, love, nurture, all of the things. And also, of course, the other things like violence and them other things, but it meets needs for them that society is not meeting due to the inequality they face. So then it is about giving them a chance to explore that and all different things that come up. So yeah, that's a lot. I could talk about it all day. So I say to Sally, how long have I got?
I know, Danny, that's brilliant. And I think what's beautiful about your work is all of your work is generated from a committed relationship to the young people in your service and to the families, and then wanting to explore the worlds of the young people and the families to try and, create social change that is completely led and informed and collaborated with them. So that's really inspiring, Danny. Thanks so much. We're going to have a really good questions and answer space in a little bit, but for the moment, just wanted to invite maybe Antla, would you like to go next?
Sure, I can.
Okay.
Thank you, Sally, and Good morning to everyone. So my name is Rialto, and I am with Sonke Gender Justice. I am based in Botswana. So with Sonke Gender Justice, I am the Youth Leadership Coordinator, meaning that my role is centered around ensuring that youth movements are strengthened in the countries that we work in, which I will talk about shortly, and ensuring that in all the projects that we implement, young voices are amplified from the design to the implementation to also post the implementation. So Sonke Gender Justice is a South African organization that was founded in 2006. We identify ourselves as a women's rights organization, and we're committed to feminist principles using a human rights-based and gender transformational approach to ensure that we achieve human rights and gender justice. And to do that, we work through strengthening governments and civil society and also individuals so that their capacity can be increased to allow them to actively participate in advancing women's rights and human rights in general. Which goes to extend to ensuring that there is the reduction of the spread of HIV, the impact of AIDS, and also elimination of poverty. So Sonke Gender Justice is headquartered in South Africa, but we also have a team that is based in the region. When we say region, we refer to other African countries who work remotely. We have myself in Botswana, we have colleagues in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, in Madagascar, in Togo, in Cameroon, in Uganda, and also in DRC. So in Sonke, we implement different projects that also promote youth participation and youth leadership. And this emanated from the fact that we saw that usually young people become an afterthought when projects are introduced and are also implemented. So you will find as we go through the discussion that in South Africa and also in the region, we have projects that ensure that there is a special focus on strengthening the capacities of young people and also ensuring that they participate in decision-making processes. Tembi, my colleague who's also on the call, will talk more about the projects in South Africa, while I will focus on the projects in the region, the African region. So the work that we do that is centered around young people, we have the Men Engage Africa Alliance. And this alliance is made up of about 22 African countries. This alliance was started in 2014. And what we noticed is that at the beginning, there was no presence of young people. And we see this happening a lot in the civil society space where young people are left behind. So when we started our 2019 to 2023 strategic plan, we said we want to have a thematic area that talks about young people. And so we came up with a thematic area that is called Youth Leadership and Intergenerational Dialogue. Intergenerational dialogue, because we understand that right now, in a lot of contexts, there are power relations. A lot of power rests in the community leaders. And so we decided that it's important to have that intergenerational dialogue platform to ensure that young people can engage with the older generation and have their voices heard. And so to that effect, we have a unit within Sonke that specifically focuses on social structural drivers. By social structural drivers, we're talking about working with traditional leaders, and religious leaders, because we know that in contexts such as ourselves, in African contexts, a lot of behavior is dictated by the culture and the religion that people follow. And in order to ensure that we dismantle those unequal power relations, it's important that we work with the power bearers being the religious and traditional leaders. So that particular thematic area ensures that we work with the relevant power bearers and bring young people on board. And so the way Men Engage Africa has been structured is that in these 22 countries where we have presence, there is what we call the main steering committee of the country network and also the youth steering committee, so as to promote that youth leadership. The youth steering committees are charged with the responsibility to ensure that they deal directly with the young people from different civil society organizations, make sure that they get their opinions, their perceptions about how to run the network and channel them to the main structures of the network. And as a result, we also have a Africa Youth Chairperson who is also supposed to have different touch points with the country coordinators in Men Engage Africa. So that is how we promote youth leadership through Men Engage Africa. But also within Men Engage Africa, we have what we call the Men Engage Africa Training Initiative, which is like an education drive to ensure that we increase the capacities of the civil society organizations that we work with in these different countries. And the last training that we had was based on feminist principles and working with social structural drivers. And the interesting part about this particular training, which took place last year, is that we had a unique setup where we had traditional leaders, religious leaders, and young people under the same roof, interrogating issues around inequality, around sexual reproductive health and rights, around young people's voices. And it was interesting to hear how both sides see things, interesting to hear also the willingness of those who we consider to be the social structural drivers to hearing young people's voices. And so we have broken that wall between them to say, it can happen that young people and the older generation can come together and learn about such things. So the other regional project that we do as Sonke Gender Justice is one called Power to Youth, which consists of other consortium partners, which are AMREF, Flying Doctors, and Rutgers, and ourselves as Sonke. So this project called Power to Youth, from the name, you can tell that it zones in on young people. The aim of this project is to ensure that young people have a voice in the decision-making processes regarding harmful practices that we see happening here in different African countries. And this project is implemented in 6 African countries and Indonesia. This project, one of its key principles is what is called meaningful and inclusive youth participation, which is a philosophy that we follow in all the things that we do, in the activities that are implemented within the countries, in the governance structure of the project. I am currently the youth representative on the global management team. And that is a very high structure within the project. There's also the global supervisory board, where there's also another youth representative. And this is to ensure that young people are involved even in the decision-making processes of the actual project. And at a country level, in these 7 countries where this project is implemented, we have what we call country management teams, where there are youth-led organizations which sit in these teams to ensure that young people's voices are also heard. And as the Sonke Youth Leadership Coordinator, my role is to ensure that the countries that are supported by Sonke, being Uganda and Malawi, are also built in terms of their capacity when it comes to youth leadership. So I work closely with the youth-led organizations to ensure that their capacity gaps are met and they are also strengthened. So that is about it. I also will try not to say a mouthful about the work that we do so that I can leave more time for my colleague Tembi to talk about the brilliant work that we're doing within the South African context. Thank you.
Wow. Really phenomenal. The scale of your work, the depth of your work, the breadth of your work, the groundbreaking nature of your work. It's going to, I'm so glad we have recorded this session, because we'll all need to listen back to actually try and process the extent of the work you're doing, which is fascinating. Yeah, as Deborah said, amazing. So really groundbreaking stuff. And we will move on to Pembe now, and we're delighted to hear you, Pembe, talk about your South African context.
Hi, colleagues. My name is Pembelishe Madi. I work at Sonke Gender Justice as a senior trainer in a unit we call the Community Education and Mobilization Unit, which is based in South Africa. But in South Africa, we work in all the different provinces. We work in Gauteng, we work in the Western Cape, we work in the Eastern Cape, in Mpumalanga, and Limpopo. So we work in almost all the provinces. So within the South African, youth work, we have specific projects that speak to young people, and they are youth-led, right? So we've got a project called Going for Goal that is in a disadvantaged community here in Gauteng, in Deep Slit. The community is called Deep Slit. It's a very crime-stricken area, a very disadvantaged area. Most of the population there is basically a squatter camp. But we found young people within that community who are very passionate about their community, and seeing, young people come out of those situations, right? So we have a project that is basically using Indigenous games to address gender-based violence and substance abuse. So the project is aimed at 13 to 18-year-olds. So it's a program for adolescent youth, right? So we're addressing issues that are sometimes, like what I said, we normally see young people as a secondary victim of gender-based violence or of gender issues, where now the focus is shifting to seeing them as primary victims. In our Domestic Violence Amendment Act here in South Africa, we are changing that. So where now parents can get prosecuted for exposing children to violence as primary victims of gender-based violence or domestic violence, as opposed to secondary victims. So in this project, we embark on like Indigenous games. So we have young people who we call youth ambassadors. So these youth ambassadors are trained on gender transformative approaches. They're trained on how to engage their peers. So like it's a peer tutor kind of thing, where they are, sensitized on what gender-based violence is, how it occurs, and how young people can report it, especially when they find themselves where, a lot of the time young people don't even have a voice in their homes. And they're just like, young people should be just seen and not heard. So we're trying to break that stigma for the young people in that community, right? So we use Indigenous games. Indigenous games are games that they play every day. So soccer, netball, diketo, all these games that, they play on an everyday basis. So we sort of infiltrate their space a little bit, play those games with them, and then see how they react to it. And then we can start, it's like a conversation starter for us. So so if I can just give an example of how we do it, we maybe play a game with it that's normally a game for boys, right? So maybe we'll play soccer. We'll ask the girls to play soccer, and we'll ask the boys to maybe play skipping rope. That's typically a boys' game or a girls' game, right? After they play the game, then we'll ask them, how do you feel playing a sport that would typically be for boys? And we'll hear the girls, feeling very uncomfortable. No, I don't feel comfortable playing soccer. No, my brother's supposed to do it. And then we start the conversation about gender issues to say, as a girl child or as a boy child, you don't need to be boxed by what society says you should be. You can step out of that gender box, right? So the typical act like a boy, act like a girl exercises. So we do those kinds of exercises with them. So I will share later so at the end of the project, we always take most significant stories of change. So these most significant stories of change are like testimonies from the actual youth participants of what the project has done for them. And so in one of the stories that we've heard is that young people actually then move away because of the project, it's protected them from a lot of things, not only just they know how to or where to report gender-based violence when they see it, when they witness it, when they're experiencing it themselves, but then it also they find themselves moving away from substance abuse, because we've got a substance abuse issue in South Africa, especially amongst young people. So that's one of our projects that we do. Another project that we do it in a community called Youthwork. And so this one is actually very important to us because it's dealing with intimate partner violence. So again, like I was saying before, is that normally we see young people as secondary victims. So it's a school-based project where we go into schools and we engage young people on intimate partner violence. So the reports that we've been getting from schools is that there's a lot of violence between the girls and the boys in the schools, right? And so when we go there, we engage them. What are the sort of issues that they're facing with the opposite gender? And so we also found that a lot of the attitude that the boys have in the schools are very patriarchal, right? So the boys are coming from homes where their fathers are beating on their wives, and they're beating on their sisters, and they're seeing a certain pattern or a certain role that a woman plays, and then a certain role that a man plays in the family. And when they go to school and they're starting off their dating relationship, they almost embody the same thing that they see at home. And with them, in their head, it's not seen as a toxic, it's not seen as harmful, it's not seen as domestic violence, because for them, it's a normal way of living. And so the project seeks then to undo those toxic masculinities that young boys are now embodying with their relationships as young as 13 years old, right? So you have a young 13-year-old boy who's beating on their girlfriend at school, in front of their friends, in front of their peers, and teachers are almost found in a position where they're helpless. But then we have to interrogate, are these sort of attitudes coming from? They're coming from home, right? Then we had to engage with parents. So we put parents, we had an intergenerational dialogue between parents, teachers, and the young people to say, what is the issue? Why are we seeing so much domestic violence among young people? And you find that it's what I see at home. This is how my parents relate to one another. Or I'm growing up in a home where there is no father. I don't know what it is. And I'm seeing, male role models around me embodying the sort of patriarchal and toxic masculinity energy around me. And I'm relating that as what a man should be. And that's how, they then relate to their peers. So I think just a nutshell is that our projects in South Africa are really focused on also, like Bonta saying, it's a Sonke strategy to get young people in on the conversation. We don't want to see young people, becoming just tokens. You just have young people sitting in the room, but their opinions are not taken into consideration. They're there as window dressers, just to say on the attendance register that we did have young people, but their voices were not heard, right? So that's what we're trying to do away with, even in the youth forums that we have in South Africa. We were part of the Universal Periodic Review that went to the UN as young people in South Africa to say, what is civil society organizations in South Africa saying about the recommendations that the countries are getting from the UN level, but they are not implementing. So we form part of a number of forums and consortiums of youth-led organizations that are holding governments accountable at a national level and sometimes even an international level. Also with the work that MENengage is doing is quite a big work in our continent and globally as well. So yeah, I think I will end it there for now and allow for questions later. Thank you.
Well, Femi, really phenomenal again, and you're really showing the kind of systemic nature of your work around trying to create systemic change. It's very evident in how you speak. And also you've spoken that you've kind of touched on the issue of patriarchy and male role models and perpetuating kind of cycles of violence, which is something that's very present in Danny's work as well. So if it's okay now, we're just going to share briefly Danny mentioned the name of a project. What does he need? There's a very short clip, which I'll let the clip speak for itself, and then we'll go back into kind of a discussion on that idea of challenging our power. It's quiet in the beginning, so don't think the volume isn't working.
He's a boy. That's the first thing people will know about him. It's a boy, they'll say. Someone will bring a blue balloon, a blue teddy bear, a blue blanket. He is born a boy. And that matters. Because he's born a boy, the world will expect certain things from him. To be brave, to be strong, to play rough, to hit back. The world will tell him that boys aren't supposed to cry, to man up when he's feeling upset. And when he hits or spits or bites, the world will shrug it off, because boys will be boys.
Okay, great. And we are going to share the links to the projects at the end of this, of course. Thanks, Deandra. So just to say, there's something there about, the issue of challenging power and dominance in working with young men to address their actual needs. And we know that, again, the Andrew Tate phenomenon is something that was raised for us, but the work is not specific to any one socioeconomic group. We know that young men are challenged by the issues of patriarchy that are present in society and that are systemic, and the kind of male role modeling that they're presented with. So just wanted to invite now Danny, Ontla and Tembe to talk a bit about status and the challenges of working with this idea of status and bringing kind of education and empowerment through youth work to support kind of a change in behavior and a change of thinking. And then just conscious as well of the time, it's just about 5 to 12 now. We want to make sure there's space for questions and answers as well, because I know there's a lot of people in the space who are interested in the discussion and who are themselves doing work. So maybe Danny, I'll go back to you to start if you wanted to take that.
Yeah, I suppose just even seeing from the audio, one of the main messages that we were trying to show was that from the moment a young boy is born, there is the expectation that he is a man now within society. So, you know, like that, the idea of you are given the glue, you are given the construction toys, you're given the toys of, you know, whatever they might be. You're conditioned very young to be a male in society, and what does that look like? And how do young people grow from a very young age into that? So for us, it is that the challenge is that youth work, you know, we're talking about starting at 10. By 10, it's already too late. You know, you need to be having these conversations very, very early on with parents, with young boys, with everybody. And because the idea then is that when is it that these conversations, so for us, say, for example, when we're talking about status, for young men, by the time they hit 12, if they are not wearing the right clothing, if they are not showing up in the right way, if they don't have, you know, this idea of status, then they're already at a disadvantage. They're being bullied. You know, there's lots already going on for them. So it can be really hard then to support them to begin to look at that. So for us, it is about beginning these conversations as early as possible. And then like part of that is that we have created spaces for boys to just be together and talk about all these things, and to share what it is like to grow up, and to really unpack what does it all mean, you know, because it's so ingrained in your conditioning that it takes time to figure out, well, what does it all mean actually? So that's some of the stuff that we're always trying to do, and just to really begin to critically think. For us, it's a lot about that critical thinking, you know, so asking questions and really getting young people to explore some of the concepts around it. And then, you know, how do you, it's a really hard thing for young people to understand then the influence that patriarchy and that wider capitalist society has on them, but it's all the time infiltrating who they are, who they're supposed to be, especially when they come from more vulnerable communities. So yeah, it's a lot. Like,
Great, Danny. Antla Thembe, is there anything there that you'd like to say?
Thank you so much. I think Danny has touched on it a bit, but what we consciously did as Sonke is to really understand the products of patriarchy, that as a starting point, and status is definitely one of them. And one thing that we have done is that we've also created approaches that really get to dial back to the root causes of certain behaviors, because, you know, we touched on the issue of behavior. And we have one such program called One Man Can. And this program centers around male engagement, or working with males as positive role models, where in the different communities that we work in, we identify men who portray positive behavior such that they can be the message carriers around the issues of gender equality and equity and social justice. So this One Man Can approach, you'd find that it's also implemented in the different countries which are part of the Men Engage Alliance. I believe that the toolkit for the One Man Can project is also being used in some of the South African projects. Thembe would also attest to that. So we see that the minute we say we create a platform for men to really open up about, for example, what to them it means to be a man, how they were raised and told a man should behave, and how that has consequently resulted in the way that they behave, and how they tend to look up to certain men. And you will find that the running or recurring theme there is also centered around them looking up to men with a certain status, a certain level of, I would say, respect from the community. So that is something we've also used in reverse to become part of the approaches that we have in the projects that we are implementing. Thembe, you can also add if you have anything.
Yeah, I think also it's important to note the issues of socialization, and how, you know, like the video says, from the moment you're born, like you're excited that it's a boy, and you already put in so much responsibility and all of that on them, and then that's when it just then becomes toxic. But I think also for us, especially in our unit, we want to also, while we engage men, we don't engage men without women in the room, because at the end of the day, we can't speak for the challenges that young women go through. We want young women to be able to say, this is exactly what is making me feel uncomfortable. This is exactly how I'm being oppressed by men. Instead of having, like, you know, we have a lot of men's forums in the community we were working in. And in the men's forums, and when you're sitting there and just visiting on the men's forum, and you're hearing that it's almost a reinforcement of the toxic masculinity, as opposed to, you know, undoing it. So men are sitting alone in their spaces and they're saying, you know, women are saying we're beating them. It doesn't hit the same, then you won't be able to understand the impact of the behavior. But I think it's very important to focus on the socialization. like and Danny said, is that the socialization, how, you know, male children are socialized, and the picture of a woman in their head from when they are young are shaped by the way that we raise them and how they are taught. You know, I think in one of our manuals, we have an activity where it speaks about how, you know, when children are brought up, a boy child will be given a gun, for instance, and a girl child will be given a doll to feed and to, you know, nurture. But already from that young age, a gun is such a violent thing, you know. So already that's the kind of violence, they're already embodying that kind of violence that a boy must have. You know, girls watch, you know, Powerpuff Girls, and boys watch wrestling. You know, what is it saying to a boy child? So those little things that I think need to be looked at, and we'll start to see a change in how, you know, boy children relate. Yeah.
Really phenomenal. You know, and I'm just looking there at the One Man Can website as well. The breadth of the work there is fascinating. I'm just really conscious there are some really experienced practitioners, youth workers in this space. Does anybody have a question they would like to pose to anybody presenting here today? And please, no question is too small or too big. They're all welcome. I might pick on somebody because Paul, sorry, you've raised your hand there. I hadn't noticed that. Sorry, Paul, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, just I mean, again, just to reiterate, Sally, it's been a fantastic learning experience for me and inspiring in terms of the work that's being done. But one of the things that sort of I'd really like to ask the three speakers, if that's okay, is about class, or poverty, or education, and the voice of young people. I mean, what strikes me in the past is that a lot of young people who have, I suppose, represented the interests of young people maybe have not come from the groups of young people that the projects are working with. And I think maybe their experience of these issues might be very differently framed. So I suppose, would it be possible just to tell us what factor or what impact class or poverty has on the extent to which you can work with men and women and young and young people in addressing these issues? How does it vary according to poverty?
Who would like to take that question? Debbie. Danny,
Yeah.
please? Yeah.
I mean, I suppose for us, I mean, class is the dominant. It's one of the dominant inequalities that our young people face, growing up and living in Dolphin House in Fatima in Dublin. And what's interesting, I suppose, about some of the work is that gender-based violence in itself isn't a class issue. It's a universal issue that happens across everyone. But violence from men to men is often very much exacerbated by class. And you know, what we find is that the communities that young people are growing up in here are quite violent. And it's not only that they are receiving that systemic violence from the inequality that they face, but then it also then comes out onto the street, and a lot of it is that men-to-men violence. So young people are really growing up in that, and that's something that we have really been talking a lot about recently, especially when then you have the kind of the epidemic of drugs and other things coming in. And one of the things that we've been thinking about is how could we respond to it differently because of the issues that areas that are oppressed within the class system face. Because like I'm going into the Oireachtas today to talk about youth work, but actually one of the main things that I will be saying is that the state have forgotten and have created class societies, particularly in Ireland, and I'm not sure if it's the same in South Africa, but particularly in Ireland. You know, the class system exists because of the state, and then it means that, you know, if the inequality issues aren't changing, it's very hard to make changes on the ground. And some young people can transcend that class issue system, but none of the communities are not coming out with that violence, you know. So it's a very much youth work is then a drop in the ocean in terms of the work that you're trying to achieve and you're trying to do. But for us, it is about how do we meet the need, because the behavior of the violence is coming from 100 things that we all know about, but how do we begin to meet the need? And for us, what young men are talking about is it is their need for mostly love. Most of the time they need love and care. They need belonging, they need acceptance, they need to be valued, they need to feel like they are part of something. So for us, what we're trying really hard to do when the class system excludes them all the time is that we're trying to find ways for them to meet those needs. And when those needs are being met, then it is about, can they make different decisions? Do you know, so that's the approach that we take.
That's great, Danny. And bringing it back to the what does he need kind of framing of your project, I think it's really helpful. And Paul, I'm sure for you and your youth work experience, that is a question that is relevant to all young men, but oftentimes, would you like to respond?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really important that we don't ignore the politics of what we're talking about. I think there has been a tendency maybe in recent years to maybe depoliticize youth work and development work more generally. And I think it's really encouraging to hear Danny and the lads talk about the politics of what you do. And I think that needs to be part up front and center in the conversation. And I'm sure, Danny, you'll make that clear to the politicians that you meet tomorrow.
Today, in fact, she's going to be speaking today to the politicians.
Oh, it's today, okay, yeah. Great. That's really encouraging.
Yeah. Anta and Tembe, do you have any response to that? And I know, Faye, you have a question, and we'll come to you.
Yeah, I could also add that you know, our work also speaks directly to issues around poverty, and so that also translates to the region, and the work that we do also extends its tentacles to advocacy, that we ensure that in the civil society organizations that we work with, their work also aligns with advocating for favorable policies. And you'll find that some of the time, these policies talk about, you know, the social development, because we understand that when there is little to no social development, that's when we have all the inequalities, that's when we have all the social ills. And we want to ensure that the organizations are able to hold the authorities accountable. So accountability is a very strong element, because what we see is that when there's no accountability, then, you know, class is perpetuated, poverty is perpetuated as well. So we tend to not look at things in isolation, because once we do, then we're going to forget the fact that there are also economic repercussions, or there are economic situations going on in these societies that we work with that need to be looked closely into, and their linkage to issues around gender inequalities and gender-based violence. So working with policymakers is quite key in the work that we do, making sure that we hold them accountable. Yeah. Tembe, maybe you can add.
Yeah, I think it really does, you know, so other social ills, you know, does impact on our work a lot. And sometimes when you're trying to address, you know, a gender issue at a specific maybe workshop or intervention, the other stuff will come out as well. And I think it's a matter of us being able to address, you know, take those issues that come out that maybe are not related to our work, and see how we address them. Because I think ignoring it and saying, well, we're just here about, you know, gender issues, or we're just here about patriarchy, but yet the other factors are a thing. Like, you know, in our context, for instance, we still have more women unemployed than men. We have a lot more unemployed women than men, and that creates a power dynamic between men and women. And then that's when we see a lot of gender-based violence happening. We still have men saying women have taken our rights, like a class issue or whatever. So I think it definitely does impact on work, but I think it's very important that we find a way to address these other issues that come up during our interventions and not just ignore them, because we're going to try and go back to the very same interventions or the same community and address a gender issue, but ignore the other issues, then we won't really, because if we're talking about poverty, like for instance, we're going to a community and we're saying, come, we want to educate community members on a specific issue, or young people on a specific issue. Half of the young people are unemployed in this country. And so somehow there needs to be some sort of incentive that you give them to be able to work with them, because I'm not going to sit in a workshop that's like for 3 hours where I could do job hunting, for instance. So it's finding a way how you can work around it, addressing the other issues that come up in youth work and in intervention.
Fantastic answer again, Thembe, and you know, really showing the intersection of gender and poverty and how they perpetuate cycles of violence, and the lack of political responses to that, which you're all actively advocating on. And I think then for me, there's an interesting question about the wider sociological kind of phenomenon of the narratives of kind of dominance that people like Andrew Tate are perpetuating, and that does seem to have a kind of something that has it has taken hold across a lot of different socioeconomic groups and young people, and why that is. I know, Faye, you're doing a project. Is it called Visible Youth or Invisible Youth? Could I ask?
It's called Visible Youth, but it's
Visible
inspired
Youth.
by the book Invisible Women, which is something
Yeah.
I highly recommend anybody read or listen to. Somebody suggested I read it, and it's quite a data text-heavy book. And somebody suggested listening to it, which I think would actually be a really good way to consume it. And then also A Brief History of Misogyny by Jack Holland is a good book as well. But yeah, the project that I'm doing, which I can talk about later if you want, I won't go into too much detail now. It's just at its design stage, because I got very frustrated there recently when we saw women blaming of a school principal in the UK who had been killed by her husband, her and her 7-year-old daughter. And there was so many references to how he was living in her shadow, and you know, he was a really nice man, but it was a real kind of like, well, what did she expect kind of thing if she's going to go off and be successful, you know? Like, well, I think we can fairly expect not to be murdered, but we would hope. But it seems that the victim blaming is seemed to be moving away from rape and sexual violence, going into other areas now, unfortunately. But so I got a little bit frustrated by that, so I've designed this project that I'm now trying to get funded. But
It's a youth-focused project, Faye, isn't it?
Pardon?
It's a youth-foced project.
It's very much a youth-focused project on all genders, and it's very much focused on a lot of what's been talked about today. Apologies, I came in late, but it is about looking at everybody in every demographic and looking at something that so often gets missed. And this is what the book Invisible Women really shows us, is the benefit of when women are involved. We don't talk enough about that. It's about, it needs to be equal so it's fair to women, but there are also so many other fantastic benefits when women's voices are heard, and that they're, and in all minority groups, and I do include women as a minority group because we're just a minority, and it is the start of intersectionality, really, being a woman. But if we look at that and kind of bring that more into situations, that is very much what the project is focused on. But there's just a couple of things I suppose I wanted to say to Danny and Paul's points about the politicizing. There was actually, I've got a clip, I'll see, can I find it and send it on to you, a woman on Question Time in the UK last week who basically stood up and spoke about a variety of different things that are causing the issues. And a huge thing of what she was saying is, you know, we talk about all this antisocial behaviour, we talk about this crime prevention. I wrote my own master's thesis this year on the adverse impact of ACEs and traumas on engagement in gang crime. And it's looking at that lack of good quality youth work, those one good adults in the various situations. And this woman on Question Time absolutely nailed it. I was sitting there looking at it on Instagram on the train, clapping, and my daughter was like, well, what are you doing? But the other thing I suppose I wanted to say, I think that sometimes comes into the socioeconomic side of it, and I think we've really seen it this week with the I didn't watch the debate last night, I'm going to go back and watch it, but around the legalization of drugs. And I know Eddie Darcy was on last night, and Aidan O'Riordan and a few different people were on, Katie Hannon, and with the result yesterday from the the trial where the monk wasn't prosecuted or wasn't found guilty, and even with Kin and the likes of Love Hate on TV, a lot of, I think, what is coming out of this is this status that violence can bring you. And a lot of people in lower socioeconomic groupings lack that status because maybe they don't have the opportunity to go to college. They don't get the good job where they get to earn the 100 grand a year working as a bank executive or whatever it may be. And they,
yeah.
and
Sorry.
that's a big thing that's coming out of it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you're picking up on some of the points that were raised and kind of reminding us that that's really helpful, actually. I'm just conscious of the time. And I know, Rafay, you have a resource, and I'm going to share that afterwards as follow-on email. There is a question about evaluation in the chat there. But also there's a question which I'm just conscious again of the time, which we might, Tembe Anantla, you might be able to follow up when we share the resources afterwards. There's a question about how you evaluate the work. We might be able to share something in the resources that points to that, if that's possible. Or did you want to say something kind of briefly about, I think, Paul, you have helpfully flagged it there. Oh, here we have it there. Dedicated research monitoring, okay. Okay, yeah, okay, very good. Okay. So I'm going to ask then, I'm going to go to Kelsey. You had a question. Maybe would you mind speaking to Kelsey?
Yeah. Oh, I was just because I'm doing Youthwork now at the minute, and I've been doing it for the last 4 years. But I'm starting to find in the casual kind of drop-in spaces where we have a lot of young males, so they might be using really like derogatory language, discriminatory language, and I'm finding when I or like my female colleagues are checking them on this language, I feel like I'm nearly reinforcing the kind of idea that it's women that's the problem, and it's women have the problem with the language and not men. So I nearly feel like I need to have a positive male role model in the space with me to be like, no, actually, as a young like boy or a young man, you should not be using this language, because they will respond better. But I'm not sure, because I don't really see a lot of positive male role models in the spaces like that in Youthwork.
Thanks, Kelsey. Danny, Tembe, Antla, would one of you have a response for Kelsey?
Yeah, I completely hear what you're saying, Kelsey. I know that, I suppose, from ourselves, and the idea of like our youth project is predominantly female based. So we do have some male youth workers, but like the majority of the team are women. And it is like we were very conscious of is how are we within spaces, and what is it that we need to do, because we have to do the work. And we were met with that same idea of, oh, don't be such a nag, or I'm only joking, or why are you getting so upset? And, you know, we were getting a lot of that when we first started doing this work. So for us, it was about then, okay, take a step back. What is it that we're bringing to the space? So are we bringing some of our own stuff? And how can we be a bit more kind of subjective, you know, and a little bit more back, where you're creating the spaces that it doesn't matter who you are, that if you are making the space safe enough, then anything can be talked about. And so for us then it was about being much more critically reflective and asking questions of young people, and then not demonizing them when they say something that is maybe towards women or something, but then saying, okay, let's talk a bit more about that, and, you know, really trying to unpack it with them, rather than them thinking that it's just a woman giving out to them. You know, because you're right, and we're not going to, like, the sector is predominantly female, so we have to find ways to kind of pull down them barriers, but it is really hard. So, you know, I totally hear what you're saying in that.
Thanks, Danny. And Tembe, I think you had a response as well.
I think also just to add on that, is that you will get a sort of a backlash from men. That's why I don't know, for us, we sort of encourage men only forum or things like that. But I think if you have women who I think it hits more if you're able to have women who can address the impact of that kind of language. You know, how does it impact on me when that kind of derogatory terms are used on me as a woman? You know, So like that, it's unfortunate that it has become sort of a normalized, and it's a norm, you know, certain things that get said to women and all of that. And it's like, no, there's no problem with it. It's how things have always been done. But I think if we can start to get to a point where we address the impact of those kinds of messaging or wording to women, then I think it would hit home for a lot of people. So in our work, we always take it back to say, think of your own sister walking down the road, or think of your own mother who has to experience that kind of violence and foul language being said to them. And that's not something that you would want to say to your daughter or to your mother or to your sister. So it doesn't make it right. And so I think it then has to go to a deeper conversation of where is it actually coming from. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Kelsey, you anything else from that from you?
No, it's just something that's been playing on my mind for a while, because I just felt like I was nearly doing more damage than good. No, thanks very much. I'll take that on board anyway.
But I know, Kelsey, as well, that, like, for instance, Danny would be open to you contacting her and maybe discussing that further around their own experience, you know? Yeah.
I know Kelsey well. Anytime, Kelsey.
Yeah.
You're great. So yeah, come on.
Thank you.
I am just conscious there as we come to the end. Maybe Themba, you could say something about the evaluation technique that Paul flagged, the most significant change, and how that works for you.
All right. So in Sonke, we've got a research, monitoring and evaluation team, like staff that do our pre and post evaluation forms, that they help us to create evidence-based reports based on what is the impact of the work, instead of just having attendance registers and having 50 people have attended the intervention, and that means that we did well, and students know what is it that the impact of that. So how we do it is then our RMEL team will come down to the community or to the intervention, and they will start interviewing participants and say, maybe you've been in the project since inception. How has your life been able to change from inception to where the project is now? And so they have their own sort of way that they coin the questions and all of that. But yeah, so we have a specific team that helps us to identify, you know, the most significant stories of change. And then from then it's sort of also a donor requirement, because also for us, we want to see that our work is having impact instead of just, you know, doing the work for the sake of doing the work. For quality assurance thing for us as well. So yeah, having that report back from actual participants, that's not, so we're not in the room when these things are being, it's specifically the team that comes in, and yeah.
And actually, Themba, I think you said you might share some of those stories of change with us, and we can share that in an email afterwards, and that'd be amazing. Philomena, you got your hand up?
Yes, I just want to really appreciate all the speakers for today and learning about this. I think, Onkla, you said something about it being in about 20 or 21 state regions in Africa or somewhere, I don't know, and Indonesia. So how many states in Africa, countries, are they all in the southern part of Africa, or you're distributed in the 4 regions? I'd like to know whether there's anything like this in Nigeria, actually. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philomena. So just to make a distinction, it's Men Engage Africa, which is present in 22 countries. And in these 22 countries, we have countries from West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa. And yes, Nigeria is part of Men Engage Africa. If you would like contacts to that, you can directly reach out to me, and then we can establish that connection. And then the Power to Youth program, that's the one where we have presence in 7 countries. 6 are in Africa, and then 1 is Indonesia. So these are 2 different projects. And these 6 countries for Power to Youth Malawi, Uganda, Kenya, Senegal, Ethiopia, and then Indonesia. Oh, I forgot Ghana, apologies for that, and Ghana. So those are the poverty youth countries.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Again, just showing the breadth of the work. Fascinating. I'm conscious we're coming to the end of the time. We are a network, so therefore we are a community. It'd be lovely to get just a round of what you're taking away from this morning's session. And I am going to start with you, Kate O'Connor.
I'm taking away such inspiration, and I'm just blown away by all the incredible work that's been done in this area, and it's really, really inspiring. And it's definitely we're leading into running a gender equality social media campaign in May, and definitely this has given a lot of fuel and thought, and will definitely enthuse my passion and commitment to the upcoming project. So thank you so much. I'm so glad I was in the space this morning.
Great, Kate, and we'll see the work in Tipperary progressing. Looking forward to that. Sarah and Vita, what you're taking away from this session?
I might go first there. I think one of the things I'm really taking away is the importance of meeting young people where they're at and kind of taking them through the journey the whole way up, not meeting them when they've already been exposed to many kind of dynamics that are harmful and difficult for them. So kind of meeting them at a young age and guiding them through it. Sarah?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you've said. Another thing that I'm taking away, I think, was somebody mentioned how youth work and development is being depoliticized, and how the importance of not doing that, and just the kind of interlocking themes of class and poverty with gender-based violence and violence. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Really good.
Thank you. Anne?
Hi, I'm just in complete awe of the whole morning, to be quite honest with you. I'm just blown away, delighted to be part of it. For me, the youth advocacy is very important, and just having that voice for the young people, they're sort of, but yeah, I'm still just, I've no words.
You're a Wexford, Anne, are you?
I'm Wexford, yes.
Yeah, great to have you,
Yeah.
Anne. Great to have you.
Thank you, thank you.
The work of the Family Resource Centre. Kelsey?
Thanks for having me today. A big thing that I'm trying to do more is network and kind of learn from other people in the sector. So today was like, I find sometimes I get really stuck in the work in my community. So it's really good to step outside of that and to kind of look from the outside. And I'm also doing a research project now on social media influence in Youthwork. So it's one thing now that I'm after getting a lot of things today, and maybe I'll reach out to some people and might interview if anybody wants to. But I just think it's just something you need to be talking about in the work, and I find I get really stuck into the work and I forget that I need to be doing these other things. So I like to remind myself that I need to do that. So thanks everybody today for all your input.
That's brilliant, Kelsey. And I suppose, projects like One Man Can and Men Engage Alliance, hopefully for you, will offer you inspiration in your work, and we're delighted to have you here. And yeah, we're stronger together. Isn't that a message we keep reminding ourselves? It's so important we're stronger together. That's why we're here. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really humbled and really admiring of the courage of all of the work and all of the practitioners that are here. And I suppose just to say that this is enormously important work, and all of you are doing really important work. And in the days when it becomes difficult, and they are many, I'm sure, is to tap into networks like this and remind yourself that you are doing really, really, really courageous and important work.
Thanks, Paul. Emer?
I think for me, it's hope. There's so many different people out there that are doing really important things, and it's also that connection piece of kind of realizing that I suppose we are all in this together. But I think hearing the different perspectives about a similar project that's working on across the globe and seeing the amazing different things people are doing, I think it's the hope piece for me.
Great, Emer, thank you. James?
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to be here and listen to the speakers. Thank you for that opportunity. The ideas that are in my head at the moment would be around community connection, particularly for young men, the importance of tenderness, and something around economic justice, as in, you know, poverty, exclusion, and all those associated issues, and how these are all very, very interconnected. Those ideas are in my head now. Obviously, they might be a bit more developed tomorrow, but that's where I am now. Thank you to the speakers and yourself. Thank you very much.
Oh, delighted to have you, James, and we will be sharing the recording as well, so it'll help you to reflect further on what arose here today for your own work. Billy?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again as well to the speakers. It was really inspiring, and just the take home for me is just, I suppose, the different programs and projects that are running, and it's very inspiring, the work that's being done, because it is such a topic of conversation, especially these days. So yeah, just thank you again, and I've taken notes and stuff of the different projects, so I look forward to looking into them more and that kind of things. Thanks very much.
And who knows the collaborations, Billy, in the future? Who knows? Great to have you here. Deborah, are you there still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
Yeah. For me, I just want to say thanks to all the facilitators this morning. I'm blown away. Mandy, you're amazing. To see a young person talk about this topic so clearly is yeah, I just want to say thank you for that. Like, as a mother of 3 boys, it was just finding the words, and growing up born in Nigeria, and just finding the words to actually describe what patriarchy is. But it was made very simple for me today, is status and respect that is automatically given to a male child. So yeah, I'm just going to reflect on that and see how I parent, you know. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. Like, it's just a reminder, it all starts with the personal, doesn't it? The subjective view of the world that we mediate everything through the personal, and you're a parent, and of course that shapes your worldview. Danny, you're heading off to speak in the Dáil in the Irish government. We were so thankful to have you here this morning, Danny. Your project is very inspiring, and how you communicate your project makes it very accessible, and which only adds to the inspiration. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you all. I'm sorry I have to leave just a bit early. I just have to run. So it was so amazing to be here with you all, and I hope to chat more in the future.
Bye, Danny.
Bye.
I'm just going to, Sinead, what you're taking away from today?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's just, for me, I just think it's so nice just to stop and think, and to hear other people's experiences, and again to hear them, you know, that global view and the work that you're doing. And very interestingly, you know, that the hard work that you're doing, because you talked about trying to break down those barriers of, you know, probably years and years and many years of tradition and people. So it's just really inspiring to hear the work that's been done globally. So thank you so much for that. For me, it's so, like, it's part of me is kind of still a bit sad that we still have to have this conversation. And then the other part of me is kind of always, you know, very confident that the work that's been done with young people in Ireland in particular is really, really good. So thank you to everyone, and best of luck. And that project in Rialto was really good as well. So it was really good to hear all the stuff that's going on.
Thanks, Sinead. It was Concern Worldwide who put us in touch with Sonke Gender Justice, so we're very thankful for that link up.
Yes. Yeah, and again, you know, where I just think the importance of linking and working together is such. I know I think I might be contacting you after. So thank you so much for giving us that insight into the youth work that you're doing in Africa, because we're looking for that all the time. I am anyway, and it's great to hear. So thank you for your feedback for both ladies. Again, I'm conscious of the time, but I think it's just really important to give people a chance to sort of reflect on what they're taking away from such a rich space. Katie?
Just so much information. I think sometimes, like what Kelsey was saying, we forget about the global context of our work because we're just steamrolling ahead in our own organisations. So it's just really refreshing and really grounding to be a part of this space. And thank you to everyone. Thanks.
We're so glad you were here, Katie. We really appreciate you taking the time to show up for it, actually. Clement, are you there? Your connection wasn't great earlier, you said. Oh.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes. Thank you so much. Actually, it was great listening to great strides being made by young women. Luckily, in the southern part of Africa, where I am as well. Very interesting stories, and the case studies that one would want to also to reflect on. I think thank you so much for the work done for the ladies, and I think thank you so much the organizer as well, you and your team, Sal and your team, for also allowing me to be in this conversation and hear from what other actors are doing in this sector with gender, sector of child rights, human rights, and the other sectors. Thank you so much.
Again, thank you, Clement, for being here. And this is, of course, the advantage of working in this online context, that we can truly be a global project. So we really appreciate you making the time and all the efforts to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Clement. Ethan, are you there?
I am, and I suppose thanks a million for everyone who spoke today. It was really nice to I suppose get a different perspective from other organizations, and I suppose it's given me a nice bit of appreciation, I suppose, for some of the youth centres that we have and the no-name and the spaces that we can try and help create to maybe even give everyone that outlet, especially from, you know, those who come from an anti-sport background and from the other areas that we cover no name. So I suppose it was really lovely to hear from you all. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ethan. Thank you for that. Faye, did you have any closing thing?
Yeah, I'm sorry that I missed so much of it. It sounds fantastic, and we'll be going through the resources and having a look at all the great stuff. I suppose a couple of my takeaways are, number one, remembering that how young children are influenced. You know, that even before 10, that I work predominantly with teenagers, but remembering just so much has already been done and so much has already been ingrained by the time they get to us, and how we can unpack that and work through it. And then I think I felt quite sad by Kelsey's point that sometimes it feels like we need to have a male youth worker there in order for the voice to be heard. And I think that is testament to the fact that there is still such a lack of respect, or a reduced respect for the voice of women. And that is something that I'm taking away, that I need to find ways that can be addressed within, you know, my own children. And I very much think across the board, feminism isn't just a female issue. We absolutely need to be raising feminist men and developing feminist men. But in the same way, you know, we need to be reminding our girls that the voice of women is just as important as men, because there are so many times they get told that it isn't, whether they're told directly, indirectly, or, you know, through advertising, through whatever it is. Yeah, it's just really made me kind of pause and think, right, I need to be a lot more active in the way that I do that.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you. Tembe, yeah, thank you. Ontla, thank you so much for I suppose what you've done today is helped us to situate the conversation with kind of such a breadth and depth. which I know we will be wanting to explore further. You have brought so much into the space this morning. Really, it's hard to even express that. But your work is phenomenal, so inspiring. Definitely going to be looking at One Man Can and Men Engage Alliance, and just to try and drill more into the methodologies of your work as well. So thank you both so much. Yeah, do you have any parting words you wanted to share?
Thank you so much, Sally, and thank you for the invitation. We also got to learn a lot about the great work that's happening in Ireland, and I believe that we have established a contact that we can use moving forward, because, you know, there's a lot to learn also from what does he need that I feel like we could embed in the work that we do. So thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been such a great session. I wish we had more time, but really thank you so much, and for the great facilitation on your part. Thank you.
The words out of my mouth, but yeah, we really appreciate the space. And yeah, just to encourage everyone that, yeah, it's not an easy work that we're doing. But that we, I think, stay in network and stay collaborating with other youth workers will really help, you know, the load become a lot easier. But yeah, thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be in this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Philomena, did we get feedback from you?
You didn't get feedback from me.
Not that I have forgotten you, but I remembered it.
Get me. You know, I just want to thank all the facilitators, you know, especially Danny, you know, from looking at it from changing the narrative, you know, from where we are at now, especially with the males, with the young men, you know, changing the narrative, letting them know that there's so much we can do. And like I say, if we keep trying to change our own sons, you know, for the future, our daughters and our sons, they will all go to a better place. And also, I was trying to look at the methodologies, you know, it's youth work, it's global youth work all over, but if we use the elements on ground, I think it will work better, we'll achieve faster. You can see what Ontla and Thembe are doing, you know, they are looking at this, they call it youth leadership and intergenerational dialogue, where they are looking at the social structural barriers, they're looking at the religious, and they're looking at the traditional. These are people that kind of in our African land that command respect, that give us, that when they say their authority. So you have to work with them. You have to bring them to the table with the young people and say, let's dialogue. This is what is happening now, and this is what they can do. How can we do it together? They are using the elements, the tradition of their land to kind of implement what they are doing, you know, and I really appreciate that, you know, when we use the elements, the realities we have on ground, not because it's being done in Ireland, we should take it, or it's being done in Africa, we should take it. We should see how we connect and how we can use what we have to work with our youth. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That's a brilliant closing point, Philomena. The methodology is absolutely transferable, and the focusing on the intergenerational piece, which is such a strong part of the project that Ontla and Thembe have brought. So thanks everybody for showing up. We've run a bit over time, apologies for that, but I think this discussion really warranted that. Thank you for coming and for participating, and we will see you. The next meeting actually is June. We're not going to have the May meeting now in person. We're going to have instead an online meeting in June. That's due to resourcing on our part. But we look forward to seeing you all again when we next meet. And thank you.
Thank you.